before the world took him.
It wasn't the cold that made the billionaire shiver. It was the little black boy sitting quietly in front of his dead son's grave. Michael Caldwell adjusted his collar, clutching the bouquet of white jasmine in his gloved hands. His driver waited by the gate, as always. Every Sunday for the past 5 years, he came alone to this cemetery, a quiet place just outside the city where silence hung heavier than grief. But today was different. Today, someone else was already there. A boy, maybe 6 years old, thin, filthy, wearing shoes that didn't match, sat cross-legged on the frozen grass. His tiny fingers were wrapped tightly around his knees, his eyes locked on the headstone that read, Ethan Caldwell, 1997-2019. Beloved son. Brave soul. Michael froze. Who was this child? Why was he here, at his son's grave? He took a cautious step forward. Gravel crunched beneath his shoes, startling the boy. In an instant, the child leapt to his feet, eyes wide with fear and something else. Something deeper. Then, without a word, the boy turned and sprinted straight into the woods behind the cemetery, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Michael just stood there, stunned. His heart was racing. Not because of fear, but because of something disturbingly familiar in the boy's eyes. Something, like Ethan. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. The boy's image kept returning to him. The way he sat so still. The way he looked before running. Michael, a man who controlled millions, who negotiated corporate mergers and dictated boardroom fates without blinking, now found himself pacing his penthouse suite, obsessing over a nameless child in rags. Why that grave? Why today? And why? Did that boy look so much like his son? By sunrise, he had made a call, one he hadn't made in over a year. Jonathan, he said, his voice sharp and resolute. I need you to find a child for me. His longtime private investigator didn't ask questions. He never did. That's why Michael trusted him. What Michael didn't know was that this wouldn't be just another case. This wouldn't be just another charity impulse or ghost of grief to bury under money. Because the truth waiting behind those woods, the truth hiding behind the boy's frightened eyes, would change everything he thought he knew about his son, about himself, and about what it really means to be a family. What would you do if a stranger appeared at your loved one's grave, looking just like them? Stick around, because what happens next will rewrite an entire legacy. Michael Caldwell's world was made of marble and silence. Even the footsteps of his housekeepers echoed like whispers down the vast halls of his mansion. Every morning began the same. Freshly ground espresso, the Times ironed flat, the stock market murmuring from a wall-mounted screen. He didn't check the weather. His driver always knew. He didn't open the mail. His assistant filtered everything but condolence letters, which he no longer read. The Caldwell estate sat on a hill above the city, a place where pain could be hidden behind landscaping and legacy. But ever since that boy showed up at Ethan's grave, Michael's world no longer felt like his own. He had built his life around control. Now a pair of trembling brown eyes was unraveling it. Miles away, in a part of the city where silence didn't exist, Sarah was ironing Luke's only decent shirt, one she'd stitched at least 3 times. The warehouse they squatted in leaked when it rained. Pipes hissed at night. The only warmth came from the small propane heater she'd salvaged from a junkyard, and the only peace came when Luke was asleep. Sarah had once been bright-eyed, ambitious, enrolled in a local arts college when she met Ethan. Their love had been quick, real, but forbidden, especially by the Caldwell name. And when Ethan died in that car accident 5 years ago, she didn't just lose him. She lost safety. She lost options. And eventually, She lost the ability to trust anyone who looked like money, especially his father. Luke was the only reason she kept going. And every Sunday morning, no matter how cold, he insisted on walking to the cemetery. "Why that grave?" she had asked him once, feigning ignorance. His answer, "Because it feels warm there." Sarah never stopped him. She just watched from the shadows and prayed they would never be seen. Meanwhile, Jonathan, the investigator, was digging. Every search led to dead ends. No school enrollment, no medical records, no address. Just one piece of security footage, grainy and flickering, captured a small figure sitting alone in front of a headstone. He brought it to Michael's office. "Is this him?" he asked. Michael didn't even blink. "Yes. Find them." Jonathan hesitated. "Sir, if I may, if what I suspect is true—" Michael raised a hand. "I don't care what it costs." But that wasn't entirely true. He didn't care what it cost in dollars. He just didn't know yet what it would cost in truth. That night, Michael poured himself a drink. He sat in Ethan's old bedroom, untouched since the funeral. Trophies still lined the shelves, and the faint scent of his son's cologne lingered in the air like a ghost refusing to leave. He remembered Ethan's laugh. Loud, reckless, full of defiance. He remembered their last conversation, sharp, cutting, final. And he remembered the name Sarah whispered in anger, a name he had dismissed. Until now, Michael picked up a photograph. It was Ethan, holding a skateboard, sunlight hitting just right to highlight the same cheekbones, the same eyes, as the boy at the grave. His grip tightened. He had to know, even if it broke him. The next morning, Jonathan called. "I found them," he said. "A warehouse on the east side. The place is barely standing. They've been hiding for years." "Who are they?" Michael asked, voice low. "A woman named Sarah," Jonathan replied, "and her son, Luke." Michael's breath caught in his throat. "Son." The word echoed through him like a bullet. He didn't wait for security. He didn't wait for his driver. He got in his car, hands trembling against the wheel, and drove straight across town. Past the mansions, past the gated neighborhoods, past the illusion that he was still in control. The warehouse stood like a wound on the edge of the city. Metal siding rusted, windows broken, graffiti scrawled across concrete. The door creaked when he pushed it open, and the air inside was cold, wet, and heavy with the scent of mildew. "Hello?" he called out, his voice foreign in the space. No reply, just a shuffling sound in the dark. Then small footsteps. A shadow emerged, thin, cautious, familiar. It was Luke. The boy stared at Michael, not with fear, but with recognition, as if part of him already knew. Two lives had been circling each other for years, one behind gates, the other behind walls of fear. Now they were face to face. But the real revelation, the truth that would rewrite everything, was still waiting in the dark. What happens when grief meets blood, and the past steps forward with a child's eyes? Keep watching. The moment Sarah speaks, nothing will ever be the same. The boy didn't flinch. Not even when Michael took a cautious step forward, his leather shoes cracking the glass underfoot. "What's your name?" Michael asked softly. The boy didn't answer. From behind him, the shadows shifted, and a voice emerged. "He's Luke." Michael turned. There she was, Sarah. She stepped out of the dark, like a memory he tried to erase. Her hair was tied back, her clothes worn, but her posture, proud, protective. "I'm his mother," she added. Michael's throat tightened. He looked at her. Really looked. Time had changed her, but not enough to hide the truth. This was Sarah, the girl Ethan used to argue with him about. The girl he called real. The one Michael dismissed as a mistake. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. For a moment, they stood in silence. Two timelines colliding. 2 lives ruined by 1 funeral. Finally, Michael whispered, "Why was he at my son's grave?" Sarah hesitated. Then she said it, the words that would tear through everything Michael thought was true. Because Ethan was his father. Silence fell like a bomb. Michael blinked. His breath caught. He took a step back, almost losing balance. "No," he murmured. "That's not possible." Sarah looked at the floor. Her arms crossed tight across her chest. "I found out after the accident," she said. "I never got the chance to tell him." Michael shook his head slowly, as if trying to physically reject the truth. His pulse thundered. "You're lying." "I'm not." "Why now? Why show up after all these years?" "We didn't plan this," she said, voice low. "Luke. He just felt something at that grave. I never even told him about Ethan. Not until recently." Michael stared at the boy. Luke stood behind Sarah now, peeking out. Scared, confused, and familiar. Those eyes, that chin, that defiant tilt of the head. All Ethan. Michael felt his knees weaken. He turned his back to them, pacing in a circle, struggling to breathe. A flash of memory. Ethan at 16, slamming a door. "You care more about the company than you care about me." "You don't get to throw your life away on a girl like that," Michael snapped. "She's not a mistake!" Ethan screamed. And now here she was, with his grandson, a boy he never knew existed. "I could have helped," Michael whispered. "You wouldn't have believed me," Sarah said. "You didn't even try." "I was 19, pregnant, grieving the love of my life. I was scared. And your lawyers were already circling before the funeral even ended." Michael turned back, his eyes raw. "You think I wouldn't have taken care of him? I think you would have buried me in court." The words hung heavy. She wasn't wrong. Back then, Michael would have done anything to protect the Caldwell name. Silence scandals. Bury loose ends, especially ones connected to a girl from the wrong side of town. Luke stepped forward, small voice cutting through the air. "Are you my grandpa?" Michael blinked, stunned. No one spoke. Then, slowly, Michael dropped to one knee. He looked the boy in the eyes, and what he saw shattered him. Not just Ethan's face, but Ethan's second chance. "Yes," Michael said, voice trembling. "Yes, I am." Luke tilted his head. "So, does that mean you're going to help my mom now?" Michael choked on his breath. Sarah looked away, blinking fast. "I will," he said, hand reaching toward the boy's shoulder. "I should have been there since the beginning, but I promise you, I'll be there now. No contracts, no prenups, no accusations. Just a broken man, finally saying the words he should have said to his son years ago." That night, Michael didn't go back to his mansion. He stayed in a hotel near the warehouse. He needed to think. About Ethan. About Sarah. About the life that had been unfolding just beyond the borders of his empire. And about the boy who had unknowingly walked into his grief and reignited something Michael thought was long dead. Hope. Would you believe someone if they told you your child had a child after they were gone? Or would the past blind you to the gift right in front of you? Keep watching. The fallout of truth is just beginning. That night, Michael sat in Ethan's car. He had kept it all these years, a dusty silver Mustang locked in the back of his garage. The seat still smelled like leather and youth, and laughter he couldn't bring back. He gripped the steering wheel with trembling hands. Luke. The name echoed in his mind like a whisper and a wound. His grandson. Ethan had a son. And no one told him. Not Ethan. Not Sarah. Not the universe. At the same time, across town, Sarah tucked Luke into a pile of blankets. There was no bed. No bedroom. Just pallets of old cloth and dreams that never had a place to land. Luke looked up at her. "Is he really Grandpa?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Yes." Luke's eyes shined. "He looks like Dad. I think he smells like him too." She almost laughed, almost cried, but instead she just kissed his forehead. "Sleep, baby. We'll talk more tomorrow." Michael didn't sleep. He walked the halls of his mansion until dawn. The silence pressed on him like punishment. At 3:47 a.m., he stood in Ethan's room again. He opened the drawer beside the bed. Inside, dusty and untouched, was a photo of Ethan and Sarah. She was laughing. He was kissing her cheek. They looked like kids who didn't know the world would break them. He sat down on the bed and stared at the photo for hours. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in years. He called his assistant and canceled everything. "No meetings this week," he said. "Clear the schedule." "But sir, all of it." He drove back to the warehouse. Not in a suit, not in a luxury car, just a sweater, jeans, old boots. When Sarah opened the door, she looked surprised, but not hostile. Michael stepped in quietly, eyes on the boy sitting on a milk crate, drawing stick figures on a torn cardboard. "I brought breakfast," Michael said, lifting the bag awkwardly. Luke looked up. "You brought food? Pancakes and little juice boxes." Luke jumped off the crate and ran toward him. Sarah didn't move. She stood with her arms folded, watching everything. Michael knelt, opened the bag, and handed Luke a small foil packet. "Still warm?" Luke smiled. "Thanks, Grandpa." Michael almost dropped the bag. "That word." He swallowed hard. "You're welcome, Luke." They sat in silence as Luke ate. Michael didn't look at Sarah until the boy was halfway through his second pancake. "I wasn't a good father," he said. Sarah tilted her head. "I thought I was," he continued. "I provided everything. But I missed everything. Ethan and we never saw eye to eye. I thought I had time." "You didn't," Sarah said flatly. Michael nodded. "No, I didn't." He looked at her now, really looked. She looked tired, fierce, alone. "You've raised him well," he said. "Thanks," she said, almost too quietly. A pause. Then Sarah asked, "What do you want from us?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Nothing." She raised an eyebrow. "I just want to know him. I want to be whatever he needs me to be." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. "You don't get to buy this." "I know," he said. "You don't get to skip the years you missed." "I know." "You don't get to make promises you can't keep." "I'm not here to promise, I'm here to show up." For the first time, her posture softened. Just slightly. That afternoon, Michael took Luke to a park. Not the fancy kind, just a regular one. They fed ducks, threw a ball, laughed. For the first time in years, Michael laughed without guilt. And for the first time in his short life, Luke had someone call him Buddy, who wasn't leaving tomorrow. That night, Sarah watched them from a distance. When Luke came back glowing, face sticky with ice cream, she pulled him close. "Did you have fun?" she asked. He nodded. "Grandpa's funny." Sarah looked at the sky. She didn't trust this yet. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to. Meanwhile, in his mansion, Michael walked past the boardroom and turned off the stock ticker. He opened a dusty drawer. Inside was a legal folder labeled Caldwell Trust, Ethan. He pulled it out, grabbed a pen, and for the first time in his life, wrote the name, Luke Caldwell. He circled it, underlined it, and under that he wrote, "Heir. Sometimes the fallout of truth isn't destruction. Sometimes it's the first crack of light breaking through everything we thought we buried. But what happens when the world finds out about Luke? And what is Sarah still hiding?" Michael stood in front of the apartment building he'd just rented for Sarah and Luke. It wasn't a mansion, but it was warm, safe, close. Inside, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table. Luke was asleep in the next room, still clutching the drawing he made at the park. In it, 3 stick figures held hands under a crooked sun. Luke, Mom, Grandpa. Michael had left 2 hours ago, but his words still echoed. "I just want to be whatever he needs me to be." Sarah stared at the cup in her hands. She wanted to believe him, but belief didn't come easy to a woman who'd had to fight every single day since her world fell apart. 6 years earlier, the hospital room was a blur of white sheets and noise. Sarah stood frozen in the hallway, hands on her stomach, as the doctors pulled a white sheet over Ethan's face. Gone, just like that. She had been 3 weeks pregnant. She never told him. She didn't get the chance. In the weeks after the funeral, Sarah tried to reach out. She called the Caldwell law office, desperate and shaking. "Please," she told the receptionist. "I need to speak to Mr. Caldwell. I'm Sarah. Ethan's—" But she never got past the gatekeepers. "Mr. Caldwell is not available. He's not taking personal calls at this time. Submit any legal concerns in writing." Sarah wrote a letter, poured her soul into it, mailed it. No reply. She found out later. It never even reached him, because one of Michael's lawyers, a man named Brenner, had flagged her as a risk. "Potential paternity claim," he wrote in an internal memo. "Advised preemptive distance. Do not engage." Sarah never knew that memo existed. She just knew that no one ever called her back. So she ran, left the apartment Ethan had paid for, took whatever she could fit in a backpack, disappeared before anyone could accuse her of chasing money. The next 5 years were survival. Motels, shelters, couch surfing, day jobs that paid less than bus fare. And then Luke was born, underweight, quiet, wide-eyed. The first time she held him, she whispered through tears, "You don't have to carry his name, but I promise you, I'll carry everything else." She didn't name him Caldwell, not because of shame, but because she never wanted the world to twist his story into something transactional. Luke would grow up with love, not as a secret, but as something sacred. Still, every Sunday, Luke asked to go to the cemetery. "Why that place?" she once asked. "Because it feels like someone's listening," he said. Sarah never asked again. Back in the present, Sarah opened her closet. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out a box. Inside, the first ultrasound photo, Ethan's old hoodie, a letter she'd written to Michael but never mailed. She unfolded the letter now, the words blurred with age and pain. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, I don't want your money. I just thought you should know. Ethan has a son. His name is Luke. He looks just like him. I'm scared. I'm alone. But I promise I'll raise him right. I just thought you'd want to know." She never sent it, because after being ignored so many times, she stopped believing her truth had value. Now that same man was showing up with juice boxes and bedtime stories. Now he said he wanted to help. But Sarah had one question left in her heart, one that haunted her every night. Would he still care if Luke wasn't a Caldwell? Across town, Michael sat in his study. He had just finished reviewing Luke's school transfer forms. He added the boy's name to his private health plan. He had even begun writing a letter to his trustees. "Luke is my grandson. I was unaware of his existence. Effective immediately, provisions are to be established." But something in his chest still ached. A gnawing feeling, a question with no answer. How many years of his life did I lose? Back in her apartment, Sarah looked out the window. She whispered to the dark, "I'm scared, Ethan, but I think he's trying." A single tear traced her cheek. "I just don't know if I can trust him yet, not fully. But Luke." Luke was already dreaming. In his sleep, he mumbled, "Tell Dad, I met Grandpa." Sometimes the truth doesn't come late. It arrives right on time, when we're finally ready to believe it. But belief is fragile. And when the past knocks again, who will answer? Michael sat in the boardroom, but he wasn't listening. His executives droned on about quarterly profits, expansion opportunities, the usual things that once lit a fire under him. But now, all he could see was a 6-year-old drawing stick figures with crayons. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Luke had given it to him yesterday. In shaky handwriting, it read, "To Grandpa, thank you for the pancakes." Michael stood up. "Cancel the rest of the meeting," he said. Everyone stared. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Later that day, he showed up at Sarah's apartment. No appointment, no warning, just Michael Caldwell on her doorstep, with paint on his jeans and blueprints in his hand. "What's that?" Sarah asked, arms folded. Michael held up the folder. "A house." She blinked. He opened it. It wasn't a mansion. It was modest, clean, full of light. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, a doghouse already drawn in. "I bought a property across the street from mine," he said. "I want you and Luke to move in." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "That's a big offer." "I'm not offering it like a gift," Michael said. "I'm offering it as a place where Luke can grow up safe, where you don't have to choose between rent and food, where he can ride a bike and make friends and feel normal." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Why now?" Michael's voice softened. "Because I spent most of Ethan's life pretending I had more time." He looked her dead in the eyes. "I'm not making that mistake again." That weekend, Michael invited Luke to his home. It was the first time the boy had seen a pool that big, or a library with ladders, or a kitchen with 5 ovens. But what he loved most was the piano. "Do you play?" Michael asked. Luke shook his head. "My dad did," he said softly. "Mom said he was really good." Michael sat down beside him and lifted the lid. "Let's learn together." That afternoon, they pressed random keys and laughed until Luke's cheeks hurt. Meanwhile, Sarah visited the new house. She walked through each room slowly. She touched the walls, ran her fingers along the counter, stood in what would be Luke's room, and imagined peace. But still, a knot tightened in her stomach. "Is this real? Or is it all going to disappear the moment we settle in?" That evening, Michael cooked dinner. Yes, he cooked. Spaghetti, slightly overcooked. Garlic bread, slightly burned. But Luke loved it. Sarah, she just raised an eyebrow. "You cooked?" "I Googled," Michael replied. "Don't act impressed." But she was, more than she let on. After dinner, Luke ran outside to show the neighbor's dog his drawing. Inside, Michael poured Sarah a glass of wine. They sat on the porch in silence. "Are you trying to replace Ethan?" she asked quietly. Michael shook his head. "No one can." He looked out into the night. "I just want to do right by his son, and maybe give you back a little of what I took." Sarah's eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Trust doesn't come easy," she said. "I'm not asking for easy," he replied. Then, without planning it, Michael said something he hadn't even admitted to himself. "I see Ethan in him every time he smiles." Sarah closed her eyes. That one sentence broke something in her. Or maybe it fixed it. She didn't cry, but she didn't argue either. The next morning, Michael enrolled Luke in a new school. He introduced him to the principal personally, handed over the paperwork, shook hands with the teachers. Luke had a new uniform, a backpack, a future, and a grandfather at drop-off. The following week, Michael spoke with a lawyer. "Put his name on the trust, full beneficiary." The lawyer raised a brow. "Are you sure?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I'm finally sure about something." But as the days passed, a strange thing happened. The closer Michael got, the more Sarah pulled back. He noticed the way she kept a physical distance, the way she never unpacked her boxes, the way she smiled, but only from the surface. And then, one night, he found something that made his stomach turn. An old envelope addressed to him, never sent, postmarked from 6 years ago. Inside, a letter. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, you don't know me, but I loved your son, and he left behind a child. What would you do if the person you're trying to help had once begged for your help, and you never saw it?" Michael held the letter like it was burning his fingers. He sat in his study, the fire crackling behind him, the room too quiet to calm the noise in his chest. The envelope had yellowed. The handwriting was hers, Sarah's, but the date? 6 years ago. He reread the opening line. "You don't know me, but I loved your son, and he left behind a child." His hands trembled. This wasn't just an oversight. This was a message, a cry that never reached him. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the letter was still in his hand. By noon, he was on Sarah's porch. She opened the door wearing an old hoodie and tired eyes. "Michael?" He didn't wait. He held up the letter. "Why didn't you send this?" Sarah froze. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. She didn't speak, not at first. Michael stepped in, calm but sharp. "I found it behind a drawer. Folded, forgotten." 6 years, Sarah. Her jaw tightened. I tried. Try harder, he said, his voice colder now. You had time to walk into my office. Time to call. I did call, she snapped. Michael paused. Sarah took a breath, then stepped back, gesturing him in. Inside, the air was heavy with unspoken words. Sarah poured a cup of tea with hands that shook only slightly. She didn't sit. I wrote that letter after the funeral, she began. I called your office 3 times. I left messages. Your assistant told me to seek legal help. One of your lawyers sent me a cease and desist. Michael's brow furrowed. I never saw anything. I know, she said quietly. That's why I stopped trying. Michael sat, the weight of her words crashing over him. I thought you didn't want anything to do with us, she continued. And truthfully, I didn't want to beg. Michael leaned forward, voice softening. I would have listened. Sarah looked him dead in the eye. Would you? He hesitated. She stepped closer. Back then, I was a girl with no college degree, no job, and a baby growing inside me. You were a grieving billionaire who thought I ruined your son's life. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. She wasn't wrong. I was scared, Michael. Not of Luke, of you. I thought you'd take him away from me. Michael looked down. Sarah exhaled, shaky. I didn't keep him from you to punish you. I kept him from you, because I didn't think you could love him. The room went still. Michael stood slowly, stepped toward her. I failed my son, he said. I never want to fail his son, too. Sarah's shoulders dropped. I believe you're trying, I do. But, he asked, I just need to know this isn't another act of guilt, that when things get hard, you won't disappear. Michael's voice broke. I missed his entire childhood. I'll be damned if I miss Luke's. From the hallway, small feet approached. Luke, rubbing his eyes, stood in the doorway. Are you two mad at each other? Michael and Sarah turned together. No, they both said. Michael knelt. We're just figuring things out. Luke blinked. Does that mean we're still a family? Michael looked at Sarah. Sarah looked back. Then she nodded. Yes, baby, she said softly. We're still a family. Later that night, as Luke slept, Michael stood on the balcony. Sarah joined him, a blanket around her shoulders. You said you'd be there, she murmured. Even when it's hard. I will. She looked at him sideways. Prove it. Michael turned. I want you both to move in. Sarah blinked. Into your house? No, into our house. He pulled out a set of keys. The new place, tomorrow. Sarah hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for the keys, but just as her fingers touched them, Michael's phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. Mr. Caldwell, this is Judge Whitmore's office. We need to speak to you regarding a custody claim, filed anonymously, challenging your involvement with the child, Luke. Michael's blood went cold. He turned to Sarah. She saw his face and instantly knew. Not everyone wanted them to become a family. What happens when a second chance becomes a legal fight? And who would dare challenge Michael Caldwell for his own grandson? The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in tone. Marble floors, polished benches, and rows of faces. Some curious, some judgmental, some bored. Michael Caldwell sat in the front row, wearing no tie. Just a navy sweater and tired eyes. Beside him, Sarah squeezed Luke's hand. Across the room, a woman in pearls stared at them like strangers. Margaret Caldwell, Ethan's mother, Michael's ex-wife, and the woman who had just filed for full custody of Luke. She had been silent for 6 years. Now she stood behind a legal army, claiming blood ties, elite schools, and stability. My son's child deserves more than this, she said, gesturing towards Sarah like a stain on linen. Sarah flinched. Michael didn't. He stood. Your son loved this woman. Margaret narrowed her eyes. My son is dead. Michael took a breath. But his son is not. The judge banged the gavel. Mr. Caldwell, This isn't your hearing. Michael turned to the judge. Calm. Precise. Then let's make it mine. Whispers broke out across the courtroom. Sarah looked at Michael, stunned. He pulled a folder from his bag and handed it to the judge. Inside, proof of paternity, a sworn affidavit acknowledging Luke as heir, school enrollments, medical support, emotional affidavits from teachers and neighbors. But more than that, a handwritten letter from Michael himself. He asked the judge to read it aloud. The courtroom fell silent. The judge cleared his throat. To whom it may concern, I am Michael Caldwell. I am a billionaire, yes. But more than that, I am a man who failed his son. I let grief turn into distance, distance into silence, and silence into regret. I didn't know about Luke, but now I do. And I will not fail him, not again. I don't ask for guardianship out of guilt. I ask for presence, for permission to love. Because sometimes, family doesn't need a court to define it. But today, I'm asking this court to recognize what already exists. A boy with two people who will never leave him again. His name is Luke, and he is my grandson. When the judge finished, the room was silent. Even Margaret looked away. Luke sat between them, doodling on a napkin, unaware of the storm above his head. Then the judge leaned forward. Custody denied to Ms. Margaret Caldwell, he said. This boy is already home. Gavel, bang. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Michael shielded Luke, ushering him through the crowd. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched. Mr. Caldwell, why take in a child so late? Do you really trust Sarah? Is this for PR? Michael stopped. He turned, and with Luke on his shoulders, he said, This is my grandson, and love is never late, only waiting. Then he walked away. That night, back at their new house, Sarah watched Luke play in the yard. Barefoot, laughing, she turned to Michael. You didn't have to do that. He looked at her. Yes, I did. Sarah's eyes softened. I'm still scared. So am I, he admitted. But maybe we can be scared together. Luke ran over, holding a crumpled leaf. Look, it looks like a dragon. Michael knelt down. Let's frame it. Sarah laughed for the first time that day. As the sun dipped below the trees, Michael looked up at the sky. He whispered, Ethan, I hope you see this. Sarah joined him, voice quiet. He'd be proud. Michael didn't reply, but in that silence he felt something shift. A weight lifting, but across town, Margaret Caldwell wasn't finished. In her estate, she sipped wine slowly, staring at the headline. Billionaire claims black grandson in shocking custody case. She folded the paper. Let's see how long that lasts. Sometimes the greatest fight isn't for money, it's for belonging, for love, for legacy. But what if not everyone's ready to let go of the past? And what if the next storm comes from within the family? Luke's journey is just beginning, and so is theirs.